Hey everyone, super happy to be here at Camp Modern Sales. My name is Bailey Fessler. I'm the Director of RevOps here at Exactly. I'm going to moderate our session on plotting the course and navigating successful territory planning in the rough terrain of 2023. As the Director of RevOps at Exactly, I oversee compensation, territory planning, and all things quote to cash myself. Spent about 10 years at Marketo Adobe and have been at Exactly for almost 1 year. For those of you who aren't familiar with Exactly, we are the leader in intelligent revenue solutions. We use AI to help support us across forecasting, compensation, and planning. With that, I'd love to introduce our panelists. Danielle, why don't you go first?
Awesome. Danielle Marquis, VP of Revenue Operations at a company called Zappy. Not Zapier, the connector, but Zappy. It is a marketing research SaaS platform. We really are trying to change the course of how large corporations look at their consumer insights, digital strategy, and help bring a little bit more of that technology based into the business decisions they're making. I've been here for about 4.5 years and in the sales, marketing, now revenue ops space for 14 years. So I've had quite a few company backgrounds, size of teams, small and large. And again, I've done the sales only, the sales and marketing ops, and then have had a opportunity that's really cool at Zappy. Might get into with some of these questions on how to look at RevOps a little bit more broader across the business.
Awesome. Great to meet you, Danielle. Don, why don't you go next?
Sure. My name is Don Otvos. I'm the VP of Business Development and Alliances at Lean Data. My historical background has been in revenue operations. So, I think I got my start back in 2010 or so. I was leading revenue operations at Lean Data up until about August of last year, and then moved over to managing our alliances team. So lots of background in what we're talking about today. Also OG Modern Sales Pros. I was at the first Modern Sales Pros meeting way back in 2015. So always happy to participate in these types of things. I really enjoy this community. Lean Data, if you're not familiar with us, we're the leader in revenue orchestration. So being able to make the data that you have in Salesforce actionable through turning your signals into plays. That's really what we're about.
Amazing. Great to meet you, Don. And last but not least, Sean.
Thanks. Sean Lane. I'm the VP of Field Operations at Drift. And like Danielle said, with all the different flavors, Field Ops is just a fancy way of saying sales ops and customer ops together at Drift. Drift's a conversational marketing company. I've been here for about 5.5 years, led kind of all different flavors of our operations teams, and worked at a company called Upserve, which is a restaurant technology company before that. So very, very excited to be here and be a part of this. Always fun to be at the MSP events.
Amazing. Great to meet you all. I always love connecting with and meeting more people in RevOps. We have a tough job to do. Before we jump into some of those nuances with territory planning, I'd love to know, since we've got kind of a summer theme going here, what's everyone's favorite kind of apple? Sean, why don't you start?
So I actually recently found my new favorite kind of apple. It's called Cosmic Crisp. If you have not had this flavor before, they are unbelievable. I will never eat another type of apple again.
Okay, that was a strong take. Don, I'm pretty sure you have a hot take too.
Yeah, I'm a Granny Smith guy. I love the tartness of the Granny Smith. Granny Smith, it makes great dried. If you have a fruit dryer, dehydrated apples, Granny Smith is absolutely the way to go. They make amazing Granny Smith, makes amazing dried apples. I would have to say Granny Smith is my favorite.
I think they're also cited the most for the most skincare benefits. I could be wrong on that, but we'll go with it. Danielle, do you have a favorite?
I don't know. I'll just go with a fun name, the Pink Ladies. Like those.
The Pink Lady's a good one. Yeah. I think I'll throw it and I'll say Honeycrisp, but we've got a good mix of apples here, which means we're going to get a lot of different perspectives.
I'm going to say, is cider a type of apple or no?
I like the Mac. I like the iBook.
So maybe, in thinking about territories, what are some strategies that you are all leveraging for identifying key accounts within territories? And how are we, ensuring that that's fair across reps? Dawn, maybe we can hear from you first on this one.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing on doing territory planning has always been that you have to start with the clean data is the biggest thing, right? If whatever you're building your planning from, you always want to make sure that the data you're leveraging is accurate, because obviously the different things you're going to be doing your territory planning on are probably tied to geography. It's probably tied to industry. It's probably tied to company size. These are all things you want to make sure you have right before you really start sending them out to your sales team and having them being worked. So for me, the biggest thing to start with is making sure you have clean data. From there, it's really working with your marketing team to understand what is your ideal customer profile or your ICP of what your target accounts are, and then hopefully ranking them to like a strong, moderate, or weak fit for your solution. And then who are the people within those ICPs that you want to target, and having multiple, right? If you want to take that ABM approach, you want to make sure who are the types of people that I want to go after, and then making sure again, that you have that data, that you are being able to pull those types of personas into your database, so that when you unleash these on your sales team, you have all the right, they have all the right tools to be able to engage from a prospecting motion with those accounts. That's kind of my initial take on how I look at it.
Yeah, those are good ones, right? Like, what do they say? Like, garbage in, garbage out. If you start with bad data. Danielle, maybe we can hear from you. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the ICP, ideal customer profile. It's huge. And the most important thing, I think, when you're putting together the plan around the ICP, you can do all the background detail. Okay, where were my wins and losses? Where's our actual company value prop really fitting in? But make sure to have a degree of flexibility, because I know when we went real hard on only talk to ICP, we had a really strong outbound presence that was, if they weren't 250 million and above, even though they were the prime vertical and their vision fit into the value prop of our platform, is like, well, part of the ICP wasn't there, so we just didn't call them. We put them in nurture, and they came back literally a week later as a active inbound through a Drift chat, booked a meeting, and we closed in like record time sales cycle. So they're a company that ideally, if they're using us and doing better business decisions, will grow, right? So they can grow with us. So having some flexibility in how you coach your teams around that ICP is important. And same with personas. We started out with, when I got here 4.5 years ago, we had one persona, Kelly. It was based off of a positive customer. But what we realized is the more our technology evolved, our persona needed to evolve as well, because Kelly was not the person who has the budget necessarily in this day and age, and Kelly's our champion. She's going to be using the platform. She's going to be the one that gets really sticky and gets more of her colleagues on board. But when you talk about something we've come out with is a really buzz phrase, but you have a chooser and a user on a lot of the SaaS platforms. So your users are who really need to make it sticky, but guess what? You've got to do your marketing coverage and your outbound efforts to the people that have the budget, which are those choosers. So that other thing is just once you get that ICP in place and you have some flexibility, also something we're actually actively struggling and have a go-to-market initiative to clear up is roles of engagement. That's something that always like is an afterthought. And even for, I've been running these teams, and it's still, even you put so much effort in your ICP and personas and get the teams coached on it and all that, and then kind of forget to like instruct them on, we have our territory set up regionally. So if you have a big enterprise company, they may operate very differently internationally than they do in the US. We have different sales teams selling to those. It might be a prospect in international and a customer in the US. So just making that as easy as possible as a RevOps team for your teams to know if they're a customer or prospect, and just have the clear, or even a path for them to ask, right? What channel do I go to just clarify before I screw up or make it a confusing experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That documentation, that transparency to the sales org is something like we're definitely really passionate about on my RevOps team as well. Sean, anything you want to add there with ICP?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys have outlined a lot of the really good kind of building blocks. I think a couple things that I would add is, territory planning is, I think, the quintessential crawl, walk, run exercise. You're going to get better at it every single year or every single cycle that your company operates in. And so it's okay to start in very simple terms, right? Figuring out what are those handful of firmographic factors that are important for your company. And then, that can be a homegrown score, right? You can, identify what are the points you want to give for each one of these things. What's going to be my A's and B's and C's? And then you can get more sophisticated as years go on. Something that we did this year at Drift to kind of switch the way we thought about our firmographic scoring was we kind of changed which outcome we were optimizing for. Very much before it was which company is going to be likely a good fit for Drift. And this year we kind of tweaked it to focus on what are the factors of companies that make it to our latest stage of opportunity? So which companies make it to contracting, and then kind of trained all of our other scoring based off of that outcome that we knew we wanted. So I think you can kind of evolve as years go by, as you get more and more sophisticated in your systems. And then the last thing I would add, and Danielle hit on this a little bit with some of her comments around, communicating this to the sales team, is you want to make sure that everyone understands why an A is an A. Right? Because people's knee-jerk reaction is always going to be, no. Like, I found this one example, they're not an A, right? And here's why. And I think the more transparent you can be about yeah, exactly, right? and I think the more transparent you can be with folks about why this is the way it is, then you'll get more cross-functional participation, right? Marketing will be bought in on running ABM campaigns against those. Customer success will look at customers that are more likely to retain and upgrade. And so I think the more widespread you can communicate the why behind how territories are built and the target accounts you're focusing on, the better it'll be for the company as a whole.
Yeah, that's great. And kind of what I heard from everybody too is like what I think about a lot in operations, that you're kind of constantly running diagnostics. Like, is this working how we expected it to work? And especially, in the conditions we're in now in 2023, kind of coming out of our pandemic era, for lack of better terminology. What are some things you guys do to be able to pivot or adjust your territory plans throughout the fiscal year? Sean, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. So, I mean, one thing we do that I think is very tactical is like we actually specialize a whole portion of our team just for that purpose, right? So our field ops group is divided into 3 teams: planning, execution, and insights. And planning does exactly what you just described, right? Typically, it's everything that happens before a rep is even in the seat. So territory planning, quota, capacity, comp design. But they're also the team that is making those adjustments as the year goes on, right? Maybe we want to invest in a new industry, or, people leave the business, new people come in. And then I think like that's something that we as operators can do a better job of kind of explaining to our business. Like, every single time somebody leaves the business, every time someone gets promoted into a new role, the stuff that then has to happen under the hood for that to be a seamless transition within the company is a long list of things, right? And so by us kind of specializing that as its own role, one, it kind of showcases how much work needs to be done there, but it also allows us to be a little bit more nimble throughout the year when those changes inevitably have to take place.
Yeah, that was a hard lesson for me in my first few years in ops, is like, things are not going to stay static. Don, what are some of your, sorry. Yeah, no.
I was going to say they shouldn't stay static, right? Hopefully your businesses are growing and evolving, and the way you think about every element of this has to constantly be also evolving to keep up.
Yeah, you could definitely probably add change management to most of our titles somewhere. Don, do you have some thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I would say the thing, especially with economics the way they are, you need to make sure that you have a plan that allows for that expansion and contraction, right? You need to have rules of engagement around what happens, when an AE gets new accounts or loses accounts, right? I think for a long time, a lot of us had the problem of, how do we define territories as we grow, right? And in those cases, it's like a a rep has a large territory and it gets whittled down, whittled down, whittled down. Well, if you're going the other direction, their territory is suddenly expanding, potentially. And so how you make sure that they stay engaged with those accounts the right way, what do they do when they inherit something new? Making sure they work, if you have somebody that attrites or you have a reduction in force, and all of a sudden I'm a rep that inherits 5 opportunities that are currently being worked. What are the rules and what is the process to make sure that the rep that inherits those opportunities continues to work them the right way, and you don't end up in a situation where you get to the end of the quarter and all of a sudden those deals are closed lost because the original rep wasn't the one involved and they didn't really, do anything to really keep the momentum going on those ops they inherited when somebody happened to leave the company. So you want to make, it's the onus is upon rev ops to really make sure that people do the right things when they either are, gaining new opportunities, or if they're losing territory, what are the rules around like what I call holdouts, right? Because everyone loves to say, hey, I'm already working this account. I'm already working this opportunity. I can't lose this one. I can't lose this one. And so you end up with situations where, okay, your territory is this, and then you're going to keep these 10 or, there's always some kind of a holdout rule. You want to make sure those are very clear, they're understood, that everyone knows what's going to happen if they, if they do lose territory, and then they also they understand what's going to happen if they gain territory and they inherit opportunities that are underway that need to be, continually be worked. The other thing I would say that I try to tend to do, because that territory planning piece is something that is really fluid. I've always tried to do account assignments in a larger geography, in a round robin method, right? So rather than say, okay, you get all the accounts that are in these 5 zip codes in the Bay Area, I'll say, hey, these 5 reps will get California, and we'll round robin the opportunities that come in to those 5 reps. I think it's a little bit more fair, right? Because that way you're not, someone doesn't get the lucrative zip codes. You're spreading that wealth out among a larger group of AEs. The other thing you can do too is if something is not being worked by a rep that inherits or has an assignment of an account, they can lose that. They have the potential of losing that account, so that the accounts that they have are accounts that they're working. Right. So when they're looking, when a manager is looking at the accounts that they're assigned, it may be a smaller number, but you have a good confidence to know, well, RevOps has told me that they will lose the ownership of that account if they don't work it or they don't have an open opportunity. Therefore, if this rep has 100 accounts, I know those 100 accounts are being worked. And that's kind of what I've put in place when I've done this in the past.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something really important there. That clear, holdover policy is everything. I don't know about you guys, but I have a 1-year-old nephew, and I just bought him my favorite kids book that I sometimes use to describe sales organizations. Do you guys know if you give a mouse a cookie, you give a moose a muffin, the Alaska version? Yeah, so there's one exception made for somebody, but everybody gets one. Yeah, Danielle, what are some of your thoughts on pivoting and getting ready to respond to market conditions?
Yeah, that's it. The piece you're just talking about, Dawn, about the having those guidelines so that people aren't also, kind of holding on to accounts and not doing the work behind them, because there's other hungry reps out there that,
Right.
will do the work that we need to bring those in, especially, every dollar matters when you're in an economic climate like we are right now. I mean, ideally in your ICP, dollars that matter, or else you're kind of screwing your customer team over. But for us, we'd tried this a couple of years ago, and I just don't think maturity wise we were ready. And so we're going to try it again, but we call it the 30, 60, 90. And you have an open queue of all of these total, your TAM, total addressable market prospects that are sitting unowned. And each of the reps on our new business team would get, say, 25 to 30 target accounts from that, where they're doing more of that hunting. And the rules around that are essentially you have 30 days to do something on that account. So if you picked that up, you have 30 days to start your outbounding efforts around it, or else it goes back to the queue and someone else can pick it up.
Yep.
60 days to try to get some sort of engagement. That doesn't have to be necessarily a meeting. It can be you're getting at least 1+ person to respond to group flows that we're sending or whatnot. And then by 90 days, if you don't have a meeting or pipeline booked, ideally that's going back to our outbound queue, because that's something we don't need our new business efforts being spent on currently, because they're just not ready to engage yet. And we want our new business team really focused on those. Think about your customer journey stages. And maybe I should have started with that, the planning for territory, but it all goes really hand in hand to think about how your teams are also set up across your customer journey. If you haven't put your customer journey down on paper, literally start with a whiteboard, and it can be another crawl, walk, run exercise. But we've gotten to the walk to run stage with our customer journey over the last 3+ years, where we're literally defining a RevOps metric around it so that we can measure efficiency and effectiveness of the teams operating for each of the value prop and conversion points of our customer journey. So we've identified a bunch of business KPIs that go into that, and we can then use actual data, not story time or live feedback, to make business decisions about, okay, well, outbound's been doing really great, but we're not doing a great job at converting that pipeline into a commercial agreement. So where do we need to focus our efforts here for the next quarter and dig in and understand what's going on. So that's a little bit what we're doing on the sales side of things. And then on the customer success side, which RevOps oversees as well, a lot of the operational aspects of at Zappy, we're actually looking at, for our long tail, digital CSM tactics. So how are we doing more with the current people we have without adding more headcount, and not leaving some of the smaller, more tactical customers out to dry? So how are we still showing value? And we have our vision around our customer group. Its acronym is VHAG. So value, health, I fail at the A every single time, and growth. But everything they're doing has to fit into one of those buckets. And so the digital CSM is being built around those same buckets. So it may not be a human getting on a call every time there's an issue, but we have at least digital touch points, FAQs, better guidance for self-serve. So those are the ways we're trying to tackle it as the environment's shifting constantly on us.
That's great. Because that doing more with less is.
Advocacy.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
Sorry, advocacy is A. Value, health, advocacy.
All good. I was just going to say, like, Danielle's last point there about the CS team, I think is something that's easy to gloss over in this conversation, right? Like the books of business or the territory of a CSM is just as important as the sales territory side of things, right? And so if you're putting all of your time and effort into how you're designing those sales territories, but you're not thinking about what's the right ratio for that book of business? Are there different service levels that you provide to different parts of your customer base? Digital being on one end of that spectrum, a high white glove touch version on the enterprise side might be on the other end of it. Like each of those then goes into things around your capacity modeling, and then you get into like comp and what you want to incentivize within those books, right? So I think it's just important to bring all of that, customer success or professional services, whatever you call it, in your organization to this conversation just as much as new logo territories.
Yeah, I'm
totally. And then
the pod conversation. I'm a big proponent of pod. It's hard when you have constantly shifting, I'd say, growth of different teams and whatnot to get that one-to-one pod. But as much as you can do it, it just makes that experience so much less friction.
So pod being like your account team, like your lead gen rep for the account, your customer success manager, and your sales. Yeah. They can get a lot of good synergies.
It's so expensive to do that, though.
No. Like I said, it's my hope we get there.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
I mean, we're always trying to do it on the SDR side, right? Like everyone always wants a one-to-one SDR to AE. And I'm like, guys, you got to leave yourself some flexibility, like I think it's almost better to make sure that you have it in a way that's not one-to-one so that you can have, you can give an SDR an experience of working with multiple different reps, or an AE the experience of working with multiple different CSMs. It's almost better to, in my mind, not to have a one-to-one as nice as it is. I almost think it's better to do it the other way.
Yeah, I can see both sides, and I've definitely, in the different phases of Marketo, we did it both ways, and especially becoming part of Adobe, like there's definitely benefits you can see. I think like what Sean was saying with that high end enterprise where you might have that white glove treatment, having those account teams linked up can go a long way. But Don, I see what you're saying too. Like, and that can be hard in the volume and velocity business on the SMB
especially if
side.
you're in a downturn too, right? I mean, like if you're in an economic downturn, it's really hard to do one-to-one, you know?
Yeah. No. So all that being said, we're crawling, walking, running. If we've got our territories set, we're, maybe we're at SKO, we're getting ready to run our data loads. How are you empowering your reps to optimize that engagement? And Danielle, I'll bring it back to you.
Yeah, so for our reps, it's a multifold. Our RevOps, similar to Sean, you said you have 3 buckets that you think about your RevOps team around. Ours is performance, process, and systems, and enablement. Enablement sits with us for now, and we have leads of each of those pillars. So I'm in the process systems. That is our purview. We are, I guess, probably aligned with like what you'd have as execution, right? So what we're helping do is ensure we have the foundational structure piping in place and setting up enablement so that we can coach reps around those processes. Is it easy to use? Is it easy to find? Is it clear? So we have we have WorkRamp as our LMS, and anytime there's a new product coming out or a major shift in process, we're doing some price packaging revamping, we always ensure there's some sort of WorkRamp certification. It keeps, honestly, the accountability going. It's not always the silver bullet that everyone wants it to be. You have to have backup documentation. Some reps really like the videos and some just want to read a doc that says step 1, step 2, and has little images, right? So just having a mix of both will help you reach the most amount of people to have that absorption of the information. And the other thing we do is we really encourage CBRs throughout the year. So customer business reviews, we intentionally don't call them QBRs because that tends to put this force of you feel like it has to be every quarter. And quite frankly, sometimes I'm a customer of many vendors. If I had a QBR with every single vendor, I wouldn't have my real job anymore. I would just be literally on Zoom with vendors. Like I get it from a customer standpoint. But having 1 to 2 serious CBRs a year, not just waiting for the renewal, helps us get a little bit of that mid-year reforecast conversation going. So we have obviously all of our performance data we're keeping an eye on. We have leadership metrics that are around meetings with new contacts, existing contacts, pipeline growth, what's happening with that pipeline growth. Every single week we share that with the company so the company can follow along with the trends that are those early indicators. And we can start to get ahead of like, hey, we're seeing meetings down multiple weeks in a row. That means we're probably going to prepare for less pipeline in the following month or 2. So the whole company, we try to communicate around that, not just our reps or managers either. And then, yeah, having those CBRs is really helpful in having account strategies off the back of that. And quite frankly, we have tried and failed with account planning and strategy in multiple different formats. We're on my director of sales ops joked about it the other day because there seems to be a good energy around this latest iteration. He's like 8th time's a charm. So just know, try again. There needs to be value, right? It can't just be another administrative task. So showing that not just the managers, but down to the reps, the value in taking some time to put in a plan together and have strategies that help you tackle that plan. And, if you're really feeling overachieving, have tactics to get to that strategy, right? But the more it feels like admin work, the less value it's going to be. And honestly, forcing that isn't going to get you any good data to tell the company any better decisions either. So, that's where we sit around that for and customer team.
I like what you touched on there with like sharing those metrics out company wide, because that's probably a way for, all departments cross functionally to have a stake in that pipeline build, or maybe there's levers or things they can pull to be, part of the solution, not part of a trending stat. That's really great. I'm going to take some notes on what you guys are doing.
Especially like you have product and engineering teams who like keeping them, like they are delivering the core value, right? And just helping them understand where those things are actually falling and resonating and who's spending time getting that out there too. So I think it's just, yeah, to that point, brings everyone along the journey.
Yeah. Sean, how about you? How are you optimizing at Drift?
Yeah, I mean, I'll build on what Danielle was saying too about some of those routines and cadences for inspecting what's happening with that account engagement, right? And I think like there's a little bit of a danger of a zoomed out view when you just look at it on a team basis or on a business unit basis. And like, I think that's the type of thing you have to look at on a per rep basis. And those frontline managers are your highest leverage audience. And so they should be a part of those conversations, just like all those cross-functional partners that Danielle was talking about. And I think the more ops and sales leadership can look at those signals together and look, come away with the same takeaways, then everybody kind of can start to be able to do that on their own and be thinking about it proactively in a way that doesn't require you to be in a meeting together, right? Like everyone should be able to open that up and look at it on their own and come to similar conclusions about what might be missing or what's trending well or what's not trending well. So I think like having those routines in place is a good start. And so, an example of something we look at in one of those routines is if our A and B accounts are our, cream of the crop, we look at what percentage of your territory's A's and B's have had engagement in the last 30 days, right? And like we have a benchmark for that for each individual rep, and anybody who's not meeting that benchmark, like that's something we zoom in on to take a look at. So I think routines and cadences is really important. And then I think to the enablement side of this question, I think, there's a couple things, but mostly I think it just comes down to not taking anything for granted, right? Like who knows where people you hire came from before this, or how good of a job somebody taught them before this about what it means to map a territory or create a plan of attack for that territory. So don't assume that people just know how to do it, right? So have a prescriptive way to do it. Like this is the Drift way of mapping territories, right? And train everybody on that so you're not falling into that trap. And I think underneath that territory mapping exercise, the thing I find time and time again of the people who are most successful are the reps who have a phenomenal relationship with their SDR and they're building that plan of attack together, right? Time and time again, the people who meet with, talk to, Slack with their SDR the most are the people that are seeing the most yield and they're on the same page about what that plan of attack looks like. And so I think just kind of nurturing that relationship, again, having a prescriptive point of view about what it should look like, but letting people kind of build it and take it on their own as well, I think gets a lot of yield out of those relationships.
I like that, building that foundation or that baseline for your company and then allowing them to have that creative space, but only once the foundation's set. That's really good.
If everything's green, no one's going to ask you questions. But if it's not, then that's where everybody's going to start to dig in.
Yeah. Don, how about you? What are you guys doing at Lean Data?
Yeah, I mean, well, what I tend to focus on there, the next step of it is like, what are you using at the sales engagement level? It's tools, right? So like now that you have everything put together, like what do I do as an SDR or an AE or as a CSM? And I think that's really what platform are you using for sales engagement? So I think that's really another key piece of really making sure that you have a good investment and in what you're using on your sales engagement side. So you have the right content written out for SDRs, for AEs, for CSMs, the right messaging for the right personas, knowing when to use those, messages, how to send them out, and then measuring the results against it. To what Sean was talking about is, knowing, where's an account stand on an engagement level, right? So, we look at we have a measurement and a score of, we look at how many emails have been sent back and forth between an account and people at Lean Data. And then we score that, and we take in meetings to account as well. And then we score that, right? So then as a manager, if I go back to my example of like where you have those 100 accounts where you have to stay engaged, I can now rank that and understand, okay, well, what is the level of engagement that we have? What are the ones that are highest scoring? What are the ones that are lowest scoring? Okay, for the ones that are lowest scoring, why are they scoring low? Are we doing enough outreach? Do we have enough people? Do we have enough of the right personas? Are we pursuing the right people? You get a lot of questions and answers if you are really leveraging your sales engagement platform in the right way. And then to Danielle's point, the other enormously important piece is enablement, right? So you can't just drop these tools on an SDR, an AE, or a CSM and expect that they know what they're going to do, right? You need to be able to give them the right enablement, give them the right training, so that they can know how to use what's put in front of them to be successful and drive to the number that they need to get to. So enablement is a very, very, very key piece of it as well.
Oh, that's good. A lot of times if I get, asked to define revenue operations or things that our departments help to support at companies, I always come back to people, process, and technology.
Yep.
Like you can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't have a process behind it to stand them up, it's not going to work.
Right.
Unfortunately, yeah, no tool is a silver bullet. Although I'm sure we all wish they were. I do. Awesome. So what is some technology that everyone's using for that efficient territory management? I guess speaking of technology, since we all have kind of tapped into some of the process being leveraged behind it. Dawn, maybe you can give us some
Sure.
insight into what your technology territory stack looks like.
In the true spirit of modern sales pros, I am not going to self-promote, and I'm not going to allow any of you to self-promote. So I'm going to tell everybody right now, go look at Lean Data, go look at Exactly, go look at Drift, and go look at Zappy. None of us can talk about our own products. Outside of that, what I talked about at the beginning was really understanding the intent of your profile of accounts, and determining what your ICP is. And the way that we did that, the tool that I really love is 6 Sense. So 6 Sense really, they came in and they said, okay, we're going to look at every account that you have, and we're going to say, we're going to rank all of your accounts based on technological and firmographic data to understand where you're going to have the most success around just getting a meeting, right? That's the way that they approach it. And so whereas we thought, hey, it's going to be everybody over 50 employees in this particular industry, that's our ICP. And it's like, well, maybe, but there could be areas that we don't know about. Maybe there are some edges of other industries where we might have success, right? And what 6 Sense has been able to do is to really find those and uncover those for us, where it's all of a sudden we're looking at an account going, wow, I would have traditionally thought that this would not be a good account, but lo and behold, we reach out to them with the right messaging and it converts to a meeting, and wow, it turned into a customer. And so we find ourselves now going into different paths of, industries that we didn't really think we would have a chance with in the past, but we're having really good success with today. The other thing I would say is on the persona side, having a really good partner on the data, where you're getting good data. We use Clearbit. They're also a partner of Lean Data. Knowing where your prospect lives, so that when you're doing an in-person event, you can target them properly for invitations to dinners or to local events. In the pandemic, that didn't really matter. Well, guess what? Now we're out of the pandemic, and you know what? Everybody moved. Everybody's remote now. So I can't, like Bailey, for example, if I was going to invite somebody to an Exactly event, well, they're headquartered in Los Gatos. So we're going to have a dinner in Los Gatos. Bailey, you should come to this dinner. Well, you're not going to come to that dinner, right? Like you're nowhere near Los Gatos, right? So like you have to make sure that you have a really good partner on the data side. So, and again, it doesn't just help your sales team, it helps your marketing team as well, right? And the way that it helps your sales team, if you know where someone lives, you're not gonna call them at the wrong time, right? Like I used to work at SalesLoft based in Atlanta, but I lived in San Francisco. I can't tell you the number of times I got calls at 5 a.m. Pacific time because somebody thought I was in Atlanta and I was Atlanta based, and they thought they were going to get me first thing in the morning. And I'm like, it's 5 in the morning. Like, why are you calling me? So it's like having that good data partner is another really, really key thing to have. Those are my two favorite tools that I think that today that we're using.
You just triggered me. We're headquartered in London, and the amount of
see,
and all everyone gives me an account team in London, and I'm like, I'm in Boston.
I know exactly. It happens a lot.
Territory planning as well. You can't
exactly
plan for the headquarters.
Yep.
Where are the users you need to? Where's your key relationships with the tool?
Yep.
Yeah, that's another good thing to have in those ROE documents too.
Yes,
Until a certain point. Yeah, but Danielle, anything you want to add about the stack at Zappy?
Oh, this is my favorite thing to talk about. Are you kidding?
And I was trying to hold myself back.
Like
I'm like, I can't go on for
this.
20 minutes about like what my tech stack is.
We are currently a Lean Data customer.
Oh, yes!
And we are a Drift customer. That was not planned in advance, but that is, we have some pretty, honestly, our ICP is a pretty straightforward, I'd say. Like I said earlier, like there's flexibility, and yeah, we have outliers that have done really well that just don't fit the normal ICP chunk, which is why you have to be a little open to just doing that discovery. But yeah, so we use Lean Data and Drift for all our inbound, and we also have Lean Data re-triggering. So like we have a one-to-one with Pardot. Pardot's our market automation. So any email we ingest is in both systems, and then once it MQLs, Lean Data redistributes. So we have those for more just like more basic, to be honest. It's not super complex rules, but it's just nice to have it clear and clean. And then for territory planning piece, yeah, we have for the size of our company, a pretty badass BI team. And so Salesforce is the source of truth for a lot of our data across the company, and Tableau is where we visualize a lot of that trending and data. We literally, and talking about continuing to do it, like we've had I joke because we call it a new thing every year, to be honest, but it's the same practice of looking at the vertical size of company. What are they actually doing? Who's stickier than not? And we're calling it now, we're back to calling it our TAM analysis. A couple of years ago is our vertical penetration analysis. They're all the same thing, but that's just goes to show like you need to have a constant pulse on that, and things do shift year to year, and in this environment, quarter to quarter. So yeah, just having a tight, and if you don't have a BI team or even a Tableau, like you can do some really funky stuff in Excel, just dumping that data in. Use ZapX to get your data from Salesforce to Google Sheets. If you're a Google company, like you can do it without the big expensive tools. Quite frankly, we're literally trying to move to NetSuite right now because all of our back-end finance is Google Sheets, souped up Google Sheets, which probably makes you cringe, Bailey, because commissions are like almost
Twitch.
So,
well, no, I do. Go ahead.
No, it's one of those, like, you don't need a lot of tools to get the base foundation done. But to the point you were saying about the most important thing to start with isn't the tool, it's the process. So knowing what you want to achieve as an outcome, what steps are going to get you there, and then you can look at what tools make sense, or if a tool's even needed, right? Like, honestly, we've been a ZoomInfo customer for a couple of years. Transparently, we're churning because we're not getting the level of ROI anymore. And a lot of these technologies can serve that up for our reps versus having our reps have to go in and do a lot. So why have licenses across the board for a really souped up platform that, quite frankly, with the likes of something like 6 Sense, we use user gems, right? We can be serving up those personas. We can have intent-based serving of those personas based on true engagement with your brand and whatnot. So yeah, user gems we use for also keeping those contacts relevant as they're switching. The market research world is a really advocacy is super high. So like if people had a good experience, they're likely bringing you to the next place or telling their peers in other connected industries to go talk to us. So we use user gems because we know that is our warmest inbound, is following someone going to a new company. So they're helping us flag those contacts moving, and they follow my best practice of what I was making reps do manually, which is marking them left and creating a new contact under the new account they're at.
And then matching and routing them to the right person, getting it assigned properly, getting it into the right sales engagement track.
Yeah.
I think you also touched on something I love to remind my sales team of. We are the hardest persona to sell to because we're the kind of people that make stuff happen without tools or in imperfect systems.
Yeah.
So kudos to us. But Sean, I'd love to hear, any of your thoughts or maybe some things that Drift's doing differently.
Yeah, I mean, these guys have hit on a couple tools that I was going to mention. Like the 6th Sense example, I think is a great one. I think it's also a good example of, when I was talking about at the beginning about, being able to do a crawl, walk, run and have some homegrown stuff. We use 6th Sense as a complement to that homegrown system, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be an either or, right? Dawn mentioned that they might pick up on some of the things that they wouldn't have naturally thought of themselves. And so we use them in parallel to one another. So I think that's one way to think about some of these tools, is it can be complementary. The user gems example, same thing. I was gonna bring that one up too. Like that's, I think, one of those examples that you can string together across a bunch of different teams when you think about campaigns, right? Like if a champion of Drift leaves one of our customers and goes and gets a new job, like I want that to trigger an ABM campaign from my marketing team and send them a bottle of champagne and congratulate them on their new job, right? Like that's the beginning of that cycle of bringing those groups together. And then I think the only thing I would add around, some of the other stuff we've talked about around territory management, like there are now better and better tools out there to go and actually do the territory management piece if you want to, right? Like you can go get a full cast, you can go get an adaptive and build those territories. I think the most important thing is to basically plan on that flexibility that we talked about earlier, right? Like know that you need a plan for how you're going to handle holdouts. Know that you're going to need a plan for when the team shrinks or grows and how you're going to handle that, because I think too often these tools are built around like the perfect version that's just not attainable, right? And so pick the tool that's going to be flexible with you throughout the year as those needs of the team change. And I think like if you can build your internal team to expect that, then they will build the tools that they buy to kind of handle and accommodate the inevitable change that's going to hit your team as well.
Yeah, and actually one other one that we use on not just the planning, but then we've all talked a lot about like, are the people doing the activity? What kind of activity? Is it actually producing results in that? So like you can readjust those territories or the account assignments or whatnot if it's not happening. So we've been a customer of Atrium for a couple of years, and this year we've like finally got the sales management lean in. Like it was on our chopping block because we were like, okay, RevOps is finding value, but we cannot for the life of us get the sales managers to lean into this valuable insights. And Q1 was the make or break. Like we get a couple managers to really hone in, and they're constantly looking at the activity goals and management. So not just like, how's my pipeline doing, but back to basics of like leading indicators. Yeah. People start to focus so much on pipeline when the economy sucks, but you got to remember you don't get to pipeline if you're not putting in the work before that pipeline.
Are you doing those fundamentals?
Yeah, just another tool that has been really helpful for us that takes some of the, crawl, walk, run. We're doing a lot of that with like just basic Salesforce dashboards, popping shit into Excel, excuse my language, but, and then, getting fun and funky with that. And so it's just like that next level of, pushing the insights, actionable insights, having benchmarks based on what everyone else is doing in that team and whatnot. So.
Yeah. And I think you make a lot of good points too of, there's a lot of different ways to get things done. A lot of these tools have like Slack alerts and things, but is that the best way to set your reps up to work from like a notification or, or do you have them going to those list views and working through things? Yeah, definitely a lot. I got a lot of takeaways, a lot of things I need to go look at. And just, does anybody have any like last key thoughts or anything they're taking away from this session, from our discussion we've had? Sean, maybe I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for folks to take away is like everything around territory management is really hard, right? And I think you need to go in knowing that, right? If you're expecting it to be easy or you're expecting it to be this, beautiful black and white exercise, like you're gonna be in for a world of hurt, right? And so, Dawn's point earlier about data is critical, right? Having that iterative approach to how you're gonna run these processes, I think is really important. And I think also like it's really nice when you have teams that can have the longer view, whether that's just on your territory plan, but also everything we just mentioned about tools. Like you need to be able to plan multiple years out on your data enrichment strategy, on your territory planning strategy. And so I think the longer tenure you have of folks on your team to be able to think about what territory planning should look like now, next year, how we get incrementally better the year after that. Like, it's just hard. And so I think it's good for people to go in eyes wide open on these types of exercises.
Yeah, I'm super grateful for stuff like Asana and being able to reuse like our fiscal planning and be like, what went well, what didn't go well. Let's rework that. We need to put this meeting ahead of the other one. Danielle, how about you? Any key takeaways?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and this topic has come up across lots of forums throughout my career, and there's no silver bullet is the biggest key takeaway. Anything we're going to say on this panel is going to be the exact answer for your company. I think what is the exact answer is what we've all mentioned around really honing in on your ideal customer profile, and not just like based on win-loss data. You've got a lot of different tips and tactics of what else can help lead you to that. And just also bring product into it, right? Like, you're building a product with a certain use case and value prop in mind. And if you're not remembering that piece, you're going to miss the mark on some of those ICPs you're going after. And again, there's no one size fits all across this. I was previously at Huddle, which is a sports analytics company selling to high school coaches across different sports. And they were literally down to, when you get into the big Midwest states, right? Like, we'd have 3 reps in one state, down to nitty gritty zip code level territory planning.
Those 4 digits.
Happy, is a little bit, and by a little bit, I mean a lot less complex, right? It's just US, international, new business, account management, growth, right? It's a bit, so there's no, the tactics will transfer, but just remember, like, none of us are going to help you. Like, you're not going to find that exact answer. You got to do some of those tactics and get the work, and just be flexible. That's the other, like, be flexible and use it as a learning experience. Continue to look at the data, continue to correlate that, and make sure you're still on the right path.
Yeah, there is no such thing as set it and forget it, right?
Not in territory planning, unfortunately.
If you want to fail.
Yeah. If you don't want to do RevOps for very long. So.
I wish I could forget it sometimes.
Check back in next year.
Don, how about you? Any key takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I'd want to get across, and I think we've all talked about it, is being flexible in what you're doing. Things do change and things aren't perfect, and you're going to have to iterate, and just be ready for that. And know that you're going to have to do that. You're not going to be able to just like build all this all out and walk away, right? Like, you are going to have to inspect, report, look and see what are the results. Where do I need to make a change? Okay, let's make a change. That said, a lot of the things that you're doing, you shouldn't change like in the first 2 weeks of deploying either, right? Like I mean, some of these things that you should be thinking about are, I'm building this segment based on employee count. Therefore, this group of employees are going to be in the 0 to 50 employee. Well, I can't all of a sudden change that to 0 to 100 2 weeks later. You're going to really, you're never going to have really good data to report on if you don't let it run for at least, a good chunk of time to make sure that the data that you have that you're making your decisions on is accurate. So I'm
going to bottle that up and get that to my sales managers.
Yeah, and maybe join some of our.
It's hard, right? Because you want to, if you see something you want to make the change, you have that like reactive. You're like, oh, I gotta change something. Like, nope, just trust the process. Take a breath. Like let it run. It's okay. But of course, if the data says you should make the change, make the change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tricky balance in RevOps sometimes. Like knowing, okay, how long have we tried this for long enough?
Yeah.
To go back and try something different.
I mean, if you get no leads for a month, you may want to pivot already, but
yeah, and then taking risks on some of those like new industries, new verticals. I can remember being at Marketo when like education started being a really big space for us, and it was risky to fully lead into that. Well, awesome. I think we've had a fantastic conversation. I have a lot of takeaways, so I wanted to thank all of you, and it's been great to meet you, and I will definitely be staying all the way in touch. So look forward or be afraid of that. So I just wanted to thank Danielle, Don, and Sean for their thoughts and having this conversation. And I'm looking forward to the next and all the rest of the events at Modern Sales Pros. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Bailey. Thanks, everybody.